Greetings, folks. Repeat here. I just wanted to give you a heads up briefly that we are going to split this show into two episodes, but both will be released over the next day or two. The reason is we had almost 2 hours with our guest, and I want you to be able to hear it, and I want you to be able to hear it together. But I wanted to break the show up in order to allow you to keep better track of where you were in the show. So if you need to pause and come back to it, that sort of thing, you aren't trying to find your place in a 2+ hour show. This is an amazing interview with Tammy Jo Schultz, captain of Southwest 1380. You may remember the story, you may not, but you won't forget it once you hear it. Thanks so much for joining us. Check 6.
Southwest 1380, if you're trying to get me, all I hear is static.
Southwest 1380 has an engine fire descending.
Southwest 1380, you're descending right now?
Yes, sir, we're single engine descending, have a fire number 1.
Alright, Southwest 1380, okay, where would you like to go to? Which airport?
Give us a vector for your closest. Philadelphia.
We're just flying 250.
Okay, heading 250. We're looking at Philly.
You're listening to the podcast, so there I was. It's how every great aviation tale begins. This is episode 34.
34. Yes, it is.
5 January 2023. Happy New Year, everybody.
Happy New Year. Yes,
Welcome.
Happy New Year. And what a great show this is going to be.
So much fun to have this special guest on. Call sign Bonnie, one of the first female aviators to fly the Hornet. I had the pleasure of meeting her in 1988. She was one of my flight instructors at VT-26 in Beeville, Texas. I don't think she talks on the show about how she got the call sign, so I'll briefly cover that here. Her instructor, when she was going through 26, was a Captain Clyde, and her maiden name was Bunnell, so they put her on the schedule as Bonnie and Clyde, and got a kick out of that.
And then you go, and then it just stuck.
It stuck, right? There are a lot worse call signs and a lot worse ways to get a call sign. So.
Oh, buddy, don't we know that?
I wanted to mention before the show here, I wanted to mention that we've got the website. So thereiwas.us. We mention it all the time, but people have come up to me and said, oh, do you have a picture of this or a picture of that? Yeah, it's on the website. Each one of these shows we put out has at least one picture that is relevant to that episode. If you use the Apple Podcasts app, we chapterize the show, and as the chapters change, often the picture in the show will change.
They're awesome pictures too. Yeah, we asked guests to send some photos from their historical files, and they're awesome.
We have a glossary up on the website, so if you hear the terms that we're using and they aren't familiar to you, go to the website. It's there in the glossary. Sign up for an account on our website, and you'll get the links to the shows that we put up there on Rumble. Several of the shows have already been recorded and are up on Rumble in video format now. But I digress. One of the first female Hornet pilots, and she really broke some glass ceilings. It was not an easy go for her, starting with trying to get in to the military. But once she got in, she was all set and then had a special day, as I recall, Fig.
Oh my gosh. It's one of my favorite stories that she told, and actually it's in her book, and her book was an amazing read. I think I read it in 2 days, but yeah, she got set up the day she checked into AOCS, Aviation Officer Candidate School. She got set up by a young ensign that just had graduated, apparently. I'm not going to ruin it for you, but it was a practical joke, the likes of which she still laughs about, although at the time it wasn't very funny for her.
No, it wasn't. But she handled that with grace and kept her head high and kept going. And I think was the right person at the right time to be one of the ones to break the glass ceiling. She never got angry. She just kept her head down. And
so impressive.
She really is.
Her story is so impressive and inspiring. I was just so impressed, first of all, by meeting her and then interviewing her and listening to her stories. But when I read her book and put it all together, what a class act. What a really class act and an awesome aviator.
She is. And I think by fate and by faith, she happened to be the right place at the right time and the person who was best suited to save Southwest Airlines 1380. When things went to crap that day, a lot of decisions had to be made, and she led that team. And she credits in her book very well the fact that there were people in the back, passengers and crew alike, who showed leadership and made themselves part of the team and effectively made her job easier in the front office. And her first officer, she credits him a great deal in the book, as she should. They worked well together. But I had no idea until I read the book that this was more than an engine failure. And okay, yeah, so it broke a window, and sadly it killed a passenger, but they almost didn't make it. It almost killed 144 passengers and 5 crew.
No, it was significant. And honestly, I really think if it wasn't for her past experience and her knowledge of aerodynamics and the way you fly an airplane that's been out of control and back in control, that probably wouldn't have ended up as well as it did.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I just can't say it any better than that. She talks about it in the book. The book is so good that you and I both agree that we need to present it to folks in the training departments at our airline so that they can look at it and glean lessons to be taught to other airline pilots.
No, there are some valuable nuggets there that I think we should discuss and teach up and coming aviators at our airlines. Just sometimes you got to think outside the box.
Absolutely. In fact, the title of the book, available on Amazon, is Nerves of Steel. And she isn't doing that to toot her own horn. She was asked by the EMT after the flight, how'd you get through TSA with those nerves of steel? Because she was just as calm and relaxed as could be. Her heartbeat was right there. Her blood pressure was right there. It was, and I often say, I think I sounded under more stress last time I ordered a cheeseburger at the McDonald's drive-thru than she did when she was telling Philadelphia Approach she had an emergency aircraft. So,
right.
Yeah. Nerves of Steel. It's a fabulous book. It's a fabulous show coming up. Enjoy the time with Bonnie as much as we did, please. Don't sit on the ejection handle.
Don't sit on it.
And enjoy
on
the show.
the tanker, through the weather. Oh, and to the tanker crew who did that. Thanks a lot. We really appreciated that. I'm just kidding. No, I'm not. Well, there I was, crossing the pond, and you could see that I wasn't exactly fond.
So there I was.
Which is how all great aviation stories start. And I'm excited for this interview. I've been waiting for this for, I don't know how many weeks. Repeat. Take it away, buddy. My co-host.
Co-host Repeat here with Fig, and I think he's in Kansas City today.
I am
from New Hampshire. There you go. Yeah, and we have with us today a very special guest, someone whom I've known for at least 4 or 5 years now. Oof. We first met in the 80s, so it's been a while, but we've been talking for a couple months now about getting her on the show. And we have with us today, by way of introduction, she was one of my flight instructors in Beeville, Texas in 1988. And she won't call herself a hero, but I'm going to embarrass her right up front. She's a heroine in so many ways. One of the first females to get to fly the Hornet. Very cool. It took a lot of perseverance. And it took a lot of stick-to-itiveness that I don't think I would have had, Fig.
Yeah.
I just don't think I would. And then most of the nation got to hear a little bit of her story back in 2018 when a Southwest jet flying from LaGuardia to Dallas encountered uncontained engine failure on the left-hand side. And I thought, wow, the engine came apart. And tragically, one of the passengers on the jet was sitting near a window where a piece of that engine destroyed the window and it pulled her partially out the window. Jennifer Reardon was her name, and she unfortunately passed from her injuries that day. But 148 other people survived. And boy, I read your book, Nerves of Steel, is available on Amazon. When I read the book, I went, wow, the extremis that airplane was in, you came a lot closer to losing it than I ever thought that day. And so I am doubly impressed. So, having embarrassed you thoroughly up front on the front of things, Bonnie, welcome. We're excited to hear all the fun stuff, all the hard stuff, the tragic and the hilarious. Welcome.
Yes, welcome.
I know because I read your book, but take us back to the beginning. How is it you became interested in airplanes, and What made you think, that you could fly one? Because, girls don't fly airplanes, right?
Well, thank you,
What a
Repeat
different
and
time.
Big. I grew up in southern New Mexico and saw Air Force jets overhead doing their fighter lead-in training. Our ranch was kind of the last thing in civilization close to the MOA there. And we had a huge hay barn. So they would use that ground reference point to do their practice. And I was usually moving organic fertilizer from wherever it fell to wherever Dad wanted it. And when I saw this air show, and it was in the day before cell phones and the internet, and our ranch was a little too far out for telephone or television. So I just started looking up or checking out books on pilots and airplanes, and came across a story in Jungle Pilot. Jungle Book's
There you go.
Uh,
That's a different story.
Jungle, yeah.
It's a great book too.
Yeah, but there's more four-feeted people in that.
Yeah.
But so Jungle Pilot, about the history of Nate Saint and how he got started in the military in World War II in aviation, and then went on to be a commercial pilot and a bush pilot, and all for no money down. And that was the amount I had to put down. So that kind of set my course. And there were a few hurdles to get through, but that's what started my interest in aviation, seeing it.
So did you have any flying experience at all when you went to AOCS?
I had gone out to my local airfield there in Roswell, New Mexico. My folks had moved there just for a little while for a school for my younger sister. And I'd paid for a lesson, but really I just got a show me flight. I never really got to have the controls. And I used one of my interview tickets. The company said that it would be okay if I turned in the ticket and used it for an instructor in an airplane. But he never mentioned ground school, and I never got a logbook. So I kind of realized I don't really know that they were lessons. I think they were kind of show me flight.
They were building time for their airline job. Never mind yours.
Right.
But when I got to AOCS, I honestly hardly knew what an aileron was until we learned in ground school.
Okay.
Yeah.
So hey, this is before we go any further, I just got to say this is another historic interview in the fact that, first of all, first female aviator, right? Absolutely. And she is a naval aviator, so she wears the proper wings. So that's awesome. Okay.
Absolutely.
Enough about that.
But how you got those proper wings? We talked with Gunny Go on one of our shows, who did 8.
Oh wow!
Did you know Gunny Go? Gunny Go Forth?
No.
What year?
Go Forth. Yes.
Go for it. Yeah. So what's your time frame when you went to AOCS, Bonnie?
1685 was the class I went into, and then half of our class got 180 degree wrong at the beginning of the nav test. So we went back to 168 or 1785, I think.
What was the time frame?
March 85.
So that was Gunny Go. Was he there?
Yeah, he would have been there because I was a battery XO in a Hawk missile battery, and he had just come from the drill field in 86 and was my battery first sergeant.
Oh man.
And told me some amazing stories of AOCS back then. And of his 20 years, what did he do? Like 12 on the drill field at Paris Island?
Yeah, at least that.
Yeah. So he was a professional drill instructor.
I don't want to misspeak, but I wonder if I got put into his class whenever I rolled back a class for my nav test. And he had one girl in his class, and she was so squared away, Eva Schofield. And I completely ruined her, the girl reputation when I went there, because we got secured, which our class never got secured. Yeah. But this new class, so squared away, and got secured. And I told her, okay, I've got a car. We've got to go to the beach. I've never been to the beach. It's Pensacola. she just wasn't so sure that was a good idea, even though we had all day until 5 o'clock, muster. But I talked her into it. We went there and I could tell she was so nervous. I just went, we have 4 hours until muster, but okay, we're going to head out. And right then, there was some kind of medical emergency and a helicopter set down on the road. So it took about an hour, but we had 3 hours, no big deal. We get going and there's a parade in the town and they've got so much of the town shut off.
Of course.
And this is before Google, so we're circumnavigating and then we get stuck. And now it took us about 2 hours. So we're no big deal. We've got an hour and we're still making our way. And it comes down to, we're going to make it, but it's going to be close. We're changing our clothes, putting our whites on over our swimsuits. We're just getting ready to run straight from the car to muster. We get to the drawbridge and it goes up.
Of course it does.
Of course it does. Absolutely.
Yeah. And we're 5 minutes late. No. And from that day on until we graduated, every single day, I think it was Gunny Goforth that he would have us come in. He would turn on the microphone so that everyone in the building could hear it. And as we did Hop and Pops, he would have me retell the story every day. And
as a lesson.
He was amused, but he wanted to make sure we were amused. And so.
Oh, that's funny. Well, there's another story you talk about in your book, your first day checking into AOCS. Would you relay that, please? Because you got suckered in on that one. That's just plain and simple.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah, I mean, I'm getting ready to launch into something I have been striving for, I don't know, 6 or 7 years practically, since high school. So I'm super excited about it. And I've been working out, so I felt like, coming from college athletics and doing well, I felt like I was up to the task, but I'm still nervous like anybody else. And I go to church that morning. They're on base, so I'll be really close. There's no way I'm going to not make it to check in for AOCS. And sit down, and some young guy my age comes in, sits down, and he just finished AOCS. We got to chatting. And he seemed like such a nice guy. I hope he hears this. He seemed like such a nice guy. And he told me, you're going to, just, you know what? Just drive your car right up to the battalion. They'll help you carry your stuff in. It's not till you get checked in and get your uniforms issued and stuff that they,
That's when the game starts.
That's when the game starts. I'm new to military and I'm familiar with ranch hand pranks, but not familiar with military pranks. So I drive up right where even admirals never dare to drive, and got out of my old rusty Mustang and went in, and everybody's screaming and hollering. And I'm thinking, what mayhem? As soon as they saw me, everybody went quiet because I'm in a dress. I'm just straight from church, and they think I'm somebody's girlfriend or something, I guess. Now that I look back on it, they're all suddenly very quiet. Can I help you, ma'am? And I pulled out my papers to say I'm checking in. And I mean, all mayhem went out, and they're screaming at me to secure something against the bulkhead. I wasn't even carrying anything. It was all still out in the car. And then somebody noticed that the car is out there, and they're like, who in the blah, 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 blah is parked on the street, And I went, oh, that's mine. I just need to go get my things. Again, it all went crazy. So
oh my gosh, he set you up. He totally set you up.
The only thing I wished I knew is, did he get to enjoy watching all this mayhem, or did he move on? I'm sure he's enjoyed that thought through his life.
Wow.
But I didn't know what a bulkhead or secure meant. So when I did get my luggage and they were screaming that, I finally just said, if you would quit yelling and use plain language, I could understand that. And of course, I mean, they just went berserk. And then I finally get through all that, and I'm headed down I'm new to all this. I don't know. I'm supposed to be a foot away from the wall on the right side. I'm just walking down the middle of the hall, and they're yelling, "Stupid, turn around, stupid, stupid." And I'm thinking to myself, that is no way to talk to somebody. And this girl is coming my way. And I'm thinking, bless her heart that they would speak to her that way.
Horrible.
It was me that they were yelling at, and I never turned around. So
Oh
I'm
my
sure
gosh.
they marked my picture for execution.
Welcome to AOCS.
So in your AOC class, Bonnie, how many females?
We were known as the class of females because there had never been 3 in the same class before. So
Wow, a total of 3.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, I went through OCS the summer of '86, and we had a platoon of female Marine officer candidates. Now, none of them had aviation contracts because the Marines didn't let females fly at that point. But we had a whole platoon, so there was 30 in my which was, and I'm going to tell you, repeat. I don't know if you can corroborate this or not, but the female Marine drill instructors were like the devil, and I avoided
terrifying.
them at all costs. I would take a good old fashioned ass chewing from any of the linebacker size Marine drill instructors, just to avoid any one of those female Marines.
They were terrifying.
They were
terrifying. They used language that I'm afraid to use today, and was then. It was but they segregated the males and females in Marine OCS.
Can I make an assumption? And I shouldn't, but were there any female drill instructors at AOCS?
No.
Okay.
No, and the funny thing is, I think it was early enough in the program that our drill instructors around me, I never heard really horrible language. Now, obviously, we were pigs, we were this, we were that.
Oh, sure.
We're maggots, we were stupid. They really cleaned up their communications. I felt like around us. Yeah. There may have been cussing, but when I hear my husband's recount of the language that was used, I was like, wow, I never heard any of that. In fact, we did get picked on a little bit, I would say, but it was in a way that it kind of earned our peers' respect. I got out of there just thinking, this is going to be great. I mean, tough, but, we're just treated, I felt like, really fair.
Well, good.
Well, that's awesome. They were professional. Yeah. So you finish AOCS and up to, I was going to say up to Whiting, but no, as I recall reading in your book, you're a
Corpus.
Yeah.
Corpus.
Fellow Corpus, yes. VT-27. So.
Yes. I got there not really knowing a lot about airplanes. Certainly ground school, you get to learn their systems and weather and all that. So that was great. I think the Navy does an extraordinary job, especially taking somebody with zero aerodynamics up to understanding what's going on. But as far as flying, there were gaps in. Captain Costin, United States Marine Corps, was my on-wing. And I always felt like they kind of held out the sticks and he got the short stick. But he was never, he always was such a gentleman. I've talked to him, we've kept in touch, and I've told him, you set such a standard that I think it was hard for the rest of my tour in the Navy for a gentleman to rise to that standard. He was just a prince among men.
That's awesome to hear. What was his fleet background, Bonnie? What did he fly in the fleet?
Yeah, he flew, I believe, C-130s, and then he went on to test pilot school. He was extraordinary. But the first flight, he demoed most of what we did. And then the second, and I kind of took notes of the departure and how to navigate within the MOA. I didn't have my instrument. Nobody, or very few, knew instruments at that point. So we used ground reference points, and then we're going to the outlying field to do touch-and-goes. And he said, hey, you know what? Let's just do the downwind entry instead of going all the way around for the break. He's still demoing, but I remember my heart just stood still for a minute because I'd studied, I thought, really thoroughly, but I had no idea what a downwind entry was. I know that sounds silly now, but so he rolled inverted, pulled down around, and wound up on downwind heading, downwind altitude. And I thought, I can't write this on my knee board, but I drew what I thought it looked like, and then we got busy doing touch and goes, which I'm sure were scary, because in my mind, I had this picture of landing, because I hadn't ever landed before. And in my mind, it was supposed to look something like how birds land, how they stop when they land.
Yeah.
So he tried to help me understand that no, we can't stop and then land.
Wait a minute, why not?
So,
Isn't that how we did
yeah.
it, Fig? We stopped and landed, right?
Well, that's
Oh,
true.
my
That's a
goodness.
fact. It was
And,
terrifying.
So we got through that and got back, and we did the break coming in, and the next day it was my turn. He goes, show me that you listened. And we went around and did everything. And then we were about the same place the day before, and I checked the winds, and they were landing the same direction. So I did the downwind entry best I could. And we know
Wait.
Marines don't scream.
Did you?
Yeah.
So
I
you
did.
did a split S to the downwind.
I just, yeah. And he
That's
knows
awesome.
this is one of my first times in charge of an airplane. And he didn't have his mask on, and instructors aren't required to be hot mask. And so I could hear his excited voice over the engine. And then I could hear the pounding of fists on the canopy. So I thought, I'm not sure he was buckled in for my downwind like I was buckled in for his downwind. But when we rolled upright and he could get his mask back on, he wanted to know what in the world was that.
What was that?
It's
what you did. That's what you showed me.
The downwind entry. And he just started cracking up. He goes, oh my gosh, I've got to be careful what I do around here.
Right.
And it was a debrief item, but we never spoke of it again.
That is outstanding.
That is amazing. Whoops. Okay. Don't demonstrate aerobatic entries into the pattern.
Yeah.
I have to tell you this because you triggered a memory. I'm flying at my current job with a brand new, first officer. I'm talking brand new. And as we're taxiing in, I said, shut down. Let's see what I say. I said, shut one down. And we always shut the number 2, the right engine down as you're pulling into the gate, right? But I said, shut one down. And I heard an engine shut down. I'm looking out, taxiing. And as we pull into the gate area, I start pushing the number 1 throttle up because we need a little extra power and nothing's working. And I look down and I see the number 1 engine shut down and the number 2's running. And I looked at him, I go, why'd you shut down number 1? And he looks at me and he goes, well, you told me to. And I'm like, you're right. I did. Words are important.
Do what I mean, not what I
kind of
say.
The same
Good
thing.
God.
He showed you what the downwind entry was, and you did it exactly.
Right. I was a faithful student to what I was taught.
Okay, so primary. Obviously, you did well enough to get your choice of
Yes.
jets, and I'm assuming that was your first choice.
Yes, I have to say, just on the human interest side of it, most of my peers in flight, I thought it was flight 2 or flight 3. I don't know
there were
how
3
many
flights,
flights.
I think, in VT-27.
Okay.
I don't remember which one I was in, but yeah, it was flight 1, 2, and 3. Yep.
Okay, I think I was in flight 3, and it was mostly Marine instructors and mostly Marine students. And as far as the instructors, most of them were kind of cautious. There was about 1 girl a year that would come through Corpus. And so they were, just kind of quiet around me. And the students who just came from the basic school, they kind of went silent around me as well. Just, I wasn't part of the Marine group, but
Sure.
it just kind of got a little isolating to always cause silence to happen in the ready room.
Oh,
and
sure.
Yeah, you mentioned it in your book. It was kind of lonely.
It was. And I was telling my mom about it. By that time, my folks had moved and they had a phone. And so I would call home every day to tell them what I'd been doing. I told Mom, I am on an island. I'm on an isolated island that's heavily populated. I mean, it's just so odd. And she said, well, just ask some of them to dinner and get to know them. And I'm like, oh, Mom, I'm sorry,
I don't
but these
understand,
guys,
Mom.
they're just from the basic school. They're warriors, they're not wanting to have dinner with somebody they don't even talk to at the squadron. And she said, well, I don't really know what to tell you. And a couple of days later, Nelson Albert, who was one of the most gregarious, confident Marine students in the group, he had his back to the door and he was going on about it's his birthday. His mom already sent his package. He'd gone and picked it up, and everybody's chatting about it until I walk in and everybody else goes silent, but he keeps chatting. And then you can see him kind of stop and turn around, and it's me that has caused such a silence. And I said, well, happy birthday. If you'd like to invite some of your friends, I'll make you a birthday cake and birthday dinner. And everybody just remains silent. He remains silent.
Oh,
and
my gosh.
I turned around and walked out. And I thought, okay, I always thought that was a bunch of psychobabble hooyah about somebody taking over your body. But I felt like my mom took over my body for a moment.
Oh my
I thought,
gosh.
why did I say that?
Why?
Why? Well, that'll be hard to live down. But you know what? I'm going to fly airplanes until they take me to the gate and say, go home. So I'm going to go fly airplanes. The next day, Nelson handed me this piece of paper that I swear he picked it up off the side of the road. It looked like it had footprints and car prints, and it was
Tire tracks.
scrumpily. Yes. And it had 4 names on it of the other guys that were coming, and 2 or 4, I think it was 4 names. Anyway, and asked, where do you live? And I said,
we're coming over for birthday cake.
Yeah. Nelson, we became friends that evening, and they gave me a hard time because growing up as a Nazarene, my family didn't drink, didn't have alcohol in the house. And so when I invited all these guys over for a shrimp boil and birthday cake, I had lemonade, Kool-Aid, and milk.
They said, where's the beer?
Right. After dinner, they finally said, okay, Terry Joe, where's the alcohol? And I went, I don't have any. They
Got some
literally
rubbing
got
alcohol
up.
if your back hurts.
They got up and searched my apartment. I mean, they were opening cabinets and
Thought
stuff.
you were messing with them.
I was messing with them, and they started cracking up. And later they got Kool-Aid packets and did what they had to order me a Kool-Aid pitcher, with a happy little face.
Oh my gosh.
But we studied for the next 2 years, 3 aircraft together, and happy memories
Awesome.
of the start in Corpus.
So that was the icebreaker for you and those Marines. And then they started treating you like a fellow aviator at that point.
Right. We got together on Sunday afternoons,
Nice.
barbecue to do the gouge and stuff like that.
The gouge. I got to put that on the glossary. No one knows what the gouge is. The
It's
gouge.
the gouge.
Oh, yeah.
It's
It's
you
the
live by the
gouge.
gouge, die by the gouge. But it's
Live and
all
die by
the
Exactly.
information that you need to know, but isn't in the books anywhere. Yeah.
Right. You live and die by the gouge.
So you wind up wandering up to Beeville, which is where I met you. So you go through Beeville,
Right.
T2s, A4s, the mighty Buckeye.
Right.
So any funny stories from flight school and then after that, well, this is where I met you. Cause I went through flight school. I think I was about a year and a half behind you. Cause when I came through T2s, you were one of the SIR grads, which, remind me what that stands for.
Service graduate.
Okay. So you just graduated from flight school, but rather than going to the fleet, they bring you back to one of the squadrons to teach what you have just learned. Yeah.
Right. And T2's one funny story as a student, again, being new, I'd practiced over the weekends, getting up into the T2, you'd have to kick step your way up, and you had to start on the correct foot, kind of like getting on a horse. You don't want to put your right foot in the saddle in the stirrup to get
Unless
off.
you like riding backwards.
Unless you like riding backwards. And the T2 made me think of, okay, get the proper step, and so that you wound up. And then I'd go through my checklist. Everything looked great. And my first flight, got ready, went down there. But the difference was getting ready for the flight. I put on my G suit, my torso harness, my vest. And, G suits, if whoever's listening doesn't know what a G suit is, I mean, it's kind of like a steel reinforced yoga pants. I mean, it's pretty tight. And then you've got your torso harness on, which is not loose. And so whenever I went to kick my foot up to get up into the first step, I hit that that T2 so hard with my toe about 2 inches shy of the kick step that it was, I felt like a gong had gone off, and I resonated all the way up from my steel toes to my teeth. And I made my instructor and the plane captain jump and step back and look at me. But, there's noise enough that you're not going to explain what happened. It's too embarrassing to go into. I just stepped back, took another try, and went on. He never asked me about it, never mentioned it.
Take that.
Yeah, take that. It looked like
take that, Jet.
Kicking him before I flew. But no, T2's great skipper, Captain Fred Grant, or commander at that time, Fred Grant. One of my favorite skippers of my whole time I was in the Navy. So T2's was fun.
That was awesome, and that's where we met, and we wound up going on a cross country together. And we were going to do a weekend long cross country. I think probably get in like 6 instrument lakes. We were going to go from Beeville, Texas to South Weymouth. First stop was Little Rock Air Force Base. And we got to know Little Rock Air Force Base really well. And I'm going to say, I was so disappointed. Yeah. Well, so Tammy Jo only mentioned me once in the book, in her book. I am known as a couple of flat tires.
Wait a minute. I might have checked out for a second. Were you guys in T2s or A4s?
Yes, T2s.
Okay,
she was Surgrad instructor. T2s. I was coming through as a student.
Okay.
So we landed in Little Rock, and I'm going to blame it on you. I was an instrument student in the back seat, so I'm going to blame the landing and the blown tires on you.
Sure.
It's what I do. If it goes wrong, it's not my fault. If it went well, I take full credit. So the tires blow, and guess who doesn't keep spare T2 tires laying around? Anyone in the Air Force, anyone in the Marine Corps, anyone in the Navy, except for the 3 training bases.
Right.
So we find ourselves spending the weekend in Little Rock, Arkansas. Yeah, we did some bowling, as I recall. Got some bowling done.
Were you stuck on the base?
Yes.
Well, the question I have, I don't remember where we got them, but somewhere along the line, we got some Razorback hats, the stuffed pig Razorback hats. And they came up, I think it was Sunday, they came and changed the tires, and Monday morning we made our way back to Beeville. And once we were cleared off the taxiway and onto the ramp, off come the helmets and the masks, and on come the Razorback hats. And we pulled into the parking spot with our Razorback hats on. The T2.
What you're not including in that story is the fact that it was a freezing weekend.
It was brutally cold. Yeah.
And the Air Force had already chosen to go to air conditioning, so there was no heat.
Oh, of course.
So, yeah. So the only place they had turned back on heat was in public spaces. So that's why we spent so much time bowling that weekend, because our rooms were freezing. And something I don't think I'd ever told you, Pete, was having just gotten married, and I married an Aggie, and from New Mexico, I have no idea of these rivalries. And when I wore that Razorback hat home, I got to have my first disapproving look from my husband. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
He said, that is not something we'll be wearing around this house.
Yeah, it's perfect. In fact, I have often referred to it as the longest winter of my life was the weekend I spent in Little Rock. So yeah, that was cold.
Oh, yes.
To paraphrase, I think it was John Steinbeck, but
you were a trooper, I will say. I still laugh about that weekend, and it was miserable, but it was so fun. So hats off to you, Repeat.
Well, you got it. Right, wherever you go, whatever you're doing, if you don't make your own fun, then shame on you. So
exactly.
Can we back up just a second? I got a question. T2s and A4s. What boat did you go to, or did you go to the same boat twice?
Lexington. Yeah, it was always Lexington.
Okay, which is now a museum floating in Corpus Christi, and we are aspiring to do a podcast from the Lexington.
From the Lex. Yeah.
Hopefully in coordination with some kind of squadron or Harrier reunion. We're working on that aspect.
Oh, yeah. Very good. Well, we'll talk afterwards.
Oh, and also while I'm thinking about it, when we talked with Gunny Go, he told us that they do a AOCS reunion in Pensacola, and he always gets invited. And so we were going to try to maybe go to one of those. And if you are part of that, you should look into that. That would be awesome.
I just found out about that myself. So definitely, I would love to go. I think that would be so fun.
And of course, repeat, if we can work that out, we should do a podcast from there.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Awesome.
Do you know what time of year it is, or is it change?
Is it in the fall or the spring, Fig? Do you remember?
I thought it was fall. I think it was fall because I think they'd had it and he couldn't go this last year because he was convalescing from his war wounds. So you did, is it a 2-year tour or a 3-year tour as a surgrad?
2.
Okay.
Yes.
And then from there, so just to set the stage here, because I have a little bit of corporate knowledge. There was a surgrad. I'm not going to say her name. She was awesome. I went through Meridian in 88, 89 timeframe, and there were also 2 Navy females that checked in somewhere around the time I checked in. They were maybe a little behind me. They were in the same class as well.
Yeah, and
I know that they couldn't. There was only a certain airframes that you could select, right?
Right.
And I remember one of the gals that was close to me got A4s somewhere.
Barber's Point, probably.
Okay. And I didn't know they were support squadron, like they flew profiles and did red air stuff, but just no deployments. So can you kind of walk us through? All right, after you left, unless you have any terrifying stories you want to tell about being a surgrad. Did you ever have your hand on the ejection
aside from
handle?
flying with repeat?
As a surgrad was probably my first time. I thought, this is not going well. And I had not reached for the ejection handle, but I did tell my student, don't touch anything, because I was an out of control flight instructor my last year as a surgrad.
Explain that because that's an intense sortie. Would you walk us through that?
Before you go into that, I want to say anybody who's never been in an airplane or has been in an airplane but not an out of control flight, if they've seen the carnival ride, the Zipper, that's about the closest approximation to what it's like if you've ever been on that. And God, I mean, I think you pull 4 negative G's at one point on the Zipper if you're in the right spot.
Please go into detail about the OCF flight, because there was 2. There was one, and then one before. Then when you went A4s, you went back. If I remember right, you went back to T2s and did another one before you started the ACM syllabus.
Yeah, and one more before you go into this. So we had I think his name was Belcher, Commander Belcher, in T2s. You remember that name? Because that's who I did mine with. And every time, what this man would do before we'd go up, before he'd put his oxygen mask on, he'd take a big old wad of Red Man. And put it in his cheek, and that dude swallowed. He never. That would make me sick on the ground without OCF. And Commander Belcher would put a jaw of Red Man in his and go. So I have taken us down a horrible rabbit hole. My apologies. So back to what an OCF flight
I'm
is.
deleting everything I just heard you say.
I'm trying not to think about it. No, out of control flight is really just what it sounds like. And we did a positive out of control flight before you soloed in T2s. And then before you would solo in A4s, you'd come back for a negative out of control flight, negative spins. And we did positive spins for T2 students. So I did
Bonnie,
out of control flight. Yes.
Explain the difference between a negative and a positive.
Oh, sure. Positive spin flight or out of control flight. We focused on your upright flat spins and stalls and things like that, which would pull actually more lateral G than positive G. But you would go through lateral, positive, negative, while you kind of flopped around a little bit after you departed to get settled into the oscillations of a flat spin. But if you're doing the A4 OCF flight, that was a negative spin flight. So you would put in the controls that would make you be upside down in a spin, and you were doing negative G and lateral G. And it was most uncomfortable.
Yes.
And so those were the two. And the
Thank you.
instructors
Thank you.
dreaded them as much as the students. When I started, I noticed some of my students were just gulping and turning green while we were on the ground. And I kind of realized, okay, I think everybody's building this up to the point that they're getting sick just thinking about it. And nobody's eating before they go on this flight. So I told them, look, I would get sick on an empty stomach with positive 100% oxygen, a positive pressure. So you've got to eat something, and we'll save some fuel to do something fun at the end, whether it's sightsee or if you want to do aerobatics. I mean, it'll be your gas to do something. You want to practice your landings, whatever, but this really isn't that bad. What we would do is go up to about 30,000 feet, and we had tip tanks in the T2, and we would do stalls, whether they were straight ahead, clean, dirty in a turn, whatever. And they're pretty minor departure from controlled flight, and practice just recovering those. And then when the tip tank fuel burned down, then we would go to the more dynamic departures. Some of them just straight up. And if it was a calm day, we'd do what you call light a fire and see if you could get up there and slide straight back. So your exhaust has some fuel left over in it, and your engines would light that on fire and it'd flash up beside your canopy, those little fun things before you kind of parade through some lateral positive, negative G's and get into that flat, kind of a maple leaf flat spin. And then the student would figure out which direction they're going and put in the controls to opposite rudder and aileron to get out of it. And then we would, if they didn't do that by about 18,000 feet, then I would do it, and we would get up there and do it again. Depart, recover, repeat about 10 times. And I would usually become familiar with what they had had for breakfast and then help maintenance clean that up when we got on the ground. But one day we went up, and the T2s were pretty, they were aging when we got there. And so those little level bubbles that show you your level of fuel,
right,
they were so scratched up that sometimes you really couldn't tell what the bubble was. And we went up there, and the very first stall, we snapped over into a spiral, not a spin, a spiral like that. I mean, it just slapped our helmets against the canopy. It was so decisive.
And that was a big cockpit. Getting your head over to the canopy was no easy feat. That was a long way.
It was pretty decisive. And we didn't have any procedures to get out of a spiral. There were no procedures. We didn't teach them. They weren't in the T2 NATOPS. And as we're spiraling down, I took the controls immediately because it wasn't a spin. And I just remember the student, we'd pre-briefed, whoever's not flying calls out the altitude, 28, 27, 26. Well, I took over immediately because this wasn't something we knew anything about, and was trying different inputs. And I remember his voice starting out pretty, 25, 24, 20, and then 20, 19, 18, 17, 16. And about 10,000 feet, and we're not getting any response. I have this adrenaline. Really, it's so funny because it really does make you incredibly strong, I think, but it also makes your brain work so fast. And I remember having all this time between 10,000 and 5,000 to think, dadgummit, I'm getting married in a few weeks, and when I eject, I am going to be the monster bride of bruises and dadgummit. And I remember throwing the stick forward and doing one more rudder pump on each side, and it wobbled out at 5,000. And we're just straight nose down as fast as the T2 can go. And at 5,000, which was the required, you have to be under control at 5 or you have to eject. And at 5,000, I said, don't touch anything. because I didn't want to say don't pull the ejection because you know it. You'd only
As
hear
soon
it.
as he hears the word ejection.
So
Boom.
so we pull out obviously above the ground and honestly it was a stupid move, I admit it, but just being a girl instructor and with a new skipper that was not a very friendly one, I thought I am not going to go back without this finished. Plus, the student will never want to get in an airplane again if we act like this almost killed us or made us eject.
Right.
And so I said, maybe just get your inputs in a little sooner. And we climbed up and finished the flight. But by that time, the fuel in the tip tank had been used. What had happened was we had an asymmetrical loading because there was a slower drain of fuel out of one tip tank. Maintenance told us that after we landed. And after we called test pilot, their TPS, and said, we just got into a spiral. And they're like, oh no, I don't think you did. And I said, I described it. I said, yeah, I think we did. I know what a spin is. I know what a stall is. And he goes, yeah, how did that happen? You have to be asymmetrically loaded for that to happen. That's why we never even put it in the NATOPS. So we went down to maintenance and they're like, that one's been sticking a little bit. So
a little fuel in the tip tank. What could go wrong?
Got out and kissed the ground when we finished. And I saw him years later and he was hilarious in retelling the tale better than I do.
That's wild. That is just crazy.
That's a good story.
It is a good story.
Oh my gosh.
Terrifying.
Don't touch anything.
Anything. But then on your question really was on to the A7. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. So you finished your 2 years as a Surrey grad, and they said, okay, you have a choice to make, right? So how did that work?
Right. I had been looking around for what I wanted to do next, obviously for a while, and via Q34 out in Point Mugu was flying A7s and doing tactical missions, doing profiles, either Bear and MiG profiles against Top Gun and other squadrons or missile profiles against ships. And so I thought, okay, that sounds good. And I went to, we studied the Chinese, Russian, and French weapons and profiles, and then simulated those against our own fleet. I went through the A7 RAG and then went on to T34, or not T34, VAQ34. And about a year into that is when Congress began considering lifting the combat exclusion policy. And that had been something that had been echoing back and forth for a while. And honestly, none of us ladies really ever chatted about it. We just were focused on doing the best at what we had available to us. And when you get in knowing those things are closed off to you, you don't come in banging on the door like, I will do this. I know some people feel like, well, why wasn't this a big issue with you? And I'm thinking, because when I got hired, it wasn't available. And I was just tackling the next thing in line, knowing that how we flew the A7 and what was already available to us would be a great precursor to whether or not they opened it up to women, because the Air Force absolutely did not allow women in tactical cockpits or in tactical missions. The Army, the Marine Corps, the Navy was it. And there was just a couple of squadrons with a couple of girls in each squadron. So, we did realize, and there was some people that came to kind of look over how the women were functioning in cockpits at our squadron. Commander Mariner was our skipper. She was in the first class of women to ever fly military aircraft in a military uniform. And she sent Pam and I to go do the A7 weapons training, which we didn't get when we went through the first time as VAQ pilots.
I'm going to be back up for just a second and ask now.
Sure.
So you talked about Commander Mariner, and I'm going to add, I think, to the exclusion of back in World War II when women were transport pilots strictly. That's all they were ever allowed to do. They were allowed to fly military airplanes, but they were only transport pilots. Move it from
But
point
they
A to
were
point
not
B.
allowed. Right. They were not allowed in the military, nor were they allowed to wear military wings.
Is
They
that
made up their
right?
own
I did not know that. I assumed that they were military and had rank.
When they
Okay.
had a death among them, they collected from among them to pay for the body to be buried or to help their parents with the funeral.
I had
Their
no idea.
wings were bought and paid for by Jacqueline, who started it and was married to a wealthy gentleman. But no, they had nothing from the military.
I did not know
but
that.
aircraft to
Wow.
fly. They were
I stand corrected.
Jacqueline Cochran.
Cochran. Thank you. Her and Nancy Love was very instrumental.
I have two quick questions before you go on, and I'm enthralled by this. Actually, I have a question, then I have a kind of a statement. A7 RAG, Lemoire's where you went through?
Yeah.
Okay. So my statement I want to make is just so it's perfectly clear to the listeners. At this time frame, the percentage of naval aviators that are female at this point is a fraction of a percent.
There really didn't do percentages back then. Because when I got out, there were 6. There were 4 of us.
Right.
There were 4 of us that flew F-18s when I left. In A7s, there were Commander Mariner, flew A7s, Pam, Sue, and myself. There'd been Lori had flown A7s, but she wasn't there anymore. She was at China Lake. So a total, there might have been 6 or 7 to have flown them ever, I think.
Right. That's what I thought. And so just to put things into perspective.
Yeah.
When you start a pilot training class, there's a large population, and then it gets really small when you go to the jet transition. And then it gets really small when you graduate. And you are in such a unique category to make it that far and then succeed where, the attrition rate's pretty high. I don't know I can't remember what it was, but I know the attrition rate was high for everybody. Right. And then when you factor in the part about the numbers that you're starting with, all the females that started are significantly. So this is very unique in for more than one reason. Okay. I just needed to get that off my chest.
Oh, well, and
Awesome.
I don't remember the attrition rate exactly. I just remember you start getting divided up into different aircraft. First, you divide up into helo, props, or jets. And then you take the jet community and you divide up into A7s, I think at that time, A6, F-14s, A4s. I don't know. There was some cargo, some admiral carriers. There was different things. So you're right. You just get splintered and splintered and splintered. And so, it's a pretty small group that's going through the RAG at that time. And there wasn't another woman going through at that time.
You picked A7. What was available to you? A7s, A4s, as far as tactical jets. What were your choices?
Well, they had just opened up the S3 going on and off the carrier. And Commander Grant asked me if I wanted to do that. And I said, not really. I want to fly something tactical if I have the chance. And Gretchen Dayob was a student that was going through at that time. And when she finished A4, she became the first woman to fly S3s on and off the boat. She's a great student. I know she probably flourished in that community. But I held on. I wanted to go to Captain Mariner's squadron. I had gotten married. My husband had opportunity to fly something on the same coast over there. If we went to the other coast, I would be way down in Miami area in VAQ 33 or out in Hawaii at Barbers Point. It was too far away. So that was the coast that we could both fly something fairly close together. And so Perfect. Really, that's how I came up with wanting to go A7s. And and was able to get that.
How many hours did you get in the A7, Bonnie?
Gosh, I don't know. I flew it for about 2.5 years. I'm sorry, I don't know. That's funny.
Okay,
I haven't been
that's
asked
all
that
right.
before.
So in the A7, and then you transitioned to the Hornet?
Yes.
Is that right?
A year and a half in the Hornet, a little over a year and a half in the Hornet. And then our squadron was standing down at that time, and the combat exclusion policy had gone through. It had been lifted, and then the military was starting to incorporate it. And while I had been my skipper's first choice to transition to the F-18, we had a new skipper. And I checked, I think the Navy was probably really wise in their choice, but my year group was 1 year group too far to transition and do a fleet tour, because I would go out to sea for the first time being either a super JO tour or a department head tour, and not having gone before. I think they were wise, even though it shut the door for me to do it. Life goes on. I had some great opportunities ahead of me.
I want to say, first of all, Tammy Jo, thank you for your service to our country. Thank you for your laying the path ahead for all the women who are now flying tactical jets. That was not the case when you came through, and I know you don't view yourself as a pathfinder and a glass ceiling breaker and all that.
Took the words right out of my mouth.
But you have done good work, and so many people, their lives are easier because of the hardships you endured with the grace that you did. So thank you for that. To our listeners, I want to ask you to go to sotherawas.us/rumble and please subscribe. So once we get to 100 subscribers, we don't have to pay to bring you these live streams on Rumble anymore. Thank you also to our sponsor, robinsbirdbraindesigns.com. If you'd like your squadron logo and your call sign on a slate coaster, laser etched on a slate coaster, that'd be a good place to go. robinsbirdbraindesigns.com. We do have a glossary page on sotheriwas.us. So if you heard a term like HUD or PIPR or something like that, I'll get those up there and we'll explain what those are if we didn't explain it during the show. We also have a links page so that you can view the Rumble videos, but you have to be subscribed to sotheriwas.us to get to that links page so you can get to the Rumble videos. Thank you to Dave Hamilton over at the Mac Geek Gab for his support in helping us get this up and underway. And thank you to Dos Gringos for the
This
music.
here's a true story.
So in the meantime,
About
until
crossing
we
the
meet
pond
again, stay safe and
at night
check 6.
in the world's smallest cockpit, on the tanker, through the weather. Oh, and to the tanker crew who did that, thanks a lot. We really appreciated that. I'm just kidding. No, I'm not. Well, there I was, crossing the pond, and you could see that I wasn't exactly fond of all the...
Oh, out of control!